The Charmers, known as Spirit Charmers in the Japanese, are an archetype originally made up of 4 female spellcaster-type monsters that each represented one of the 4 elements: water, earth, fire, and wind. However, everything changed when 2 months later, light and dark attributed Charmers showed up. What felt like 100 years would pass when suddenly a new product was released, a structure deck named Spirit Charmers. And although this deck's dueling skills are great, it has a lot more that it needs to have added before it's ready to OTK anyone. But I believe the Charmers can save Yugioh. The archetype debuted in the 2005 pack Lost Millennium. Further support would constantly be added over the next 15 years, such as in the Duelist Genesis, Elemental Energy, Enemy of Justice, Order of Chaos, The Shining Darkness, Maximum Crisis, Savage Strike, Rising Rampage, Ignition Assault, Eternity Code, and the most recent support, which was in 2020's structure deck Spirit Charmers. And let's just be honest with ourselves, there's probably going to be more. Their playstyle, like the name implies, revolves around charming opponents' monsters. Each iteration does this in a different way. The original Charmers are flip monsters that can steal a monster of a corresponding attribute from the opponent's field. And nowadays, with the addition of the new trap Unpossessed, this makes the Charmers incapable of being destroyed by battle, significantly boosting the potency of their effects. Their familiar possessed forms can either be summoned normally, or by sending its base form along with an identical attributed monster from the field. You can special summon it from either the deck or hand. On top of this, if summoned this way, they also have piercing abilities, with this ability also being amplified by the new trap Possessed, along with the new spell Awakening of the Possessed. Their cataclysmic forms let you special summon identical attributes to the monster you tribute. But I'm going to level with you all, the cataclysmic forms, they're not good. They have like 400 attack and that effect is just, it's not good, I'm sorry. Finally, the link forms let you take a corresponding monster of the same attribute from your opponent's graveyard and special summon it to your side of the field. Overall, the Charmers have no one particular play. Instead, they rely on taking advantage of the attributes your opponent chooses to wield. Oh, and it's probably worth mentioning that there is also a Channeler form. However, only Wynn's form has been revealed so far. All of these forms will most likely share the ability to negate all effects on the field, apart from those it shares its attributes with. Sadly, in terms of storylines, there's no actual official story when it comes to the Charmers. However, we do know a couple things about them from the lore of other cards and some dual terminal things. So, here's what we know so far. 4 young girls all enrolled in a magical academy designed to teach those with an aptitude for elemental magic. Their teacher was a powerful spellcaster known as Dharc. She herself had mastered all 4 of the elements, and so wanted to extend her knowledge to those that shared her affinity. The first lesson they would receive was to check their affinities through a magical spellbinding circle. Eria would resonate with water, Aussa with earth, Hiita with fire, and Wynn with wind. The girls would continue to study diligently, all the while spending much time together at the academy. Their first big assignment was to adventure out into the world and find a familiar, a spirit that they shared an elemental connection with. Each would have a different experience on their journey. Eria, whilst on the edge of a lake, met a small creature all by itself, bruised and battered. Eria comforted the creature and could see it had lost a fight. Eria would give some of her magic to the creature, helping him grow ever so slightly in strength. They both made a pact to protect each other and grow stronger together. Aussa, while lost in the endless chasms of a mountain, was struck by a small acorn on top of her head. It had been thrown by a marmot with a nefarious horn on its head and small wings adorning its back. After a playful exchange, the two would join together. Hiita, whilst atop a volcano, saw a fox that's tail flickered with a small flame. Both of their eyes met, each with a fierce and intense passion for battle. The two would come together over this mutual pursuit for the thrill of the fight. Finally, Wynn, who had been caught in a terrible storm, took shelter beneath a tree. She heard a whimper of a small creature, curled up, shivering from the cold. It was a petite dragon. Wynn bundled it up under her cloak to keep it warm until the storm passed. The two, from this moment on, would become inseparable. The 4 returned from their journeys with their new familiars. Together, they would all spend time bonding and playing. and after many months of studying to control their powers, it was time for them to learn to harness the powers of the familiars. They would allow a spiritual connection in order for their familiars to possess them. This would cause each of the familiars to evolve into more powerful forms, and at the same time, give the charmers the ferociousness and battle experience of their partners. It was only for a brief moment, but when Eria connected with Yugioh, there was something else. Something dark buried beneath it. She sensed a dark destiny awaiting her familiar, and it would one day steal him away from her. After several adventures out into the world, their elemental powers began to manifest more, allowing the charmers to fight alongside their familiars in a physical form, giving them room to use their own elemental abilities to help them. With even more training and time, they became so powerful they had enough elemental energy to bond with another spirit. And while each of the charmers did do this, they found using two spirits' powers together was extremely difficult. So far, only Wynn was able to channel the powers of her two spirits together. Although the others most likely will be able to achieve this too, there are some thoughts and rumours why Wynn was able to accomplish this first. Allegedly, it was because she sought something that could only be gained through power. For you see, Wynn had an older sister named Winder. She was the one who taught her everything she knew, but unfortunately, she learned from a letter from her father that she had met with a terrible fate. Her corpse was reanimated into a puppet that would do their every bidding. Wynn vowed she would free her sister from that fate. It was around this time where Dharc, their teacher, had also grown in power too. She had discovered a way to manipulate both light and dark elements, and on one of her adventures, she brought home two orphans that were interlinked by fate, Lyna and Dharc. The two would undergo the affinity ceremony and would each possess the elements of light and dark. The original four charmers would help them find their familiars and master the art of possession. However, that's when it happened. Oh, do you want to know what happens next? Me too, sadly. That's all we have so far. Hopefully a bit more additional support will come out, or some Master Guide lore to reveal future storylines or hidden pasts. But for now, let's take a look at each of the individual monsters. Eria the Water Charmer, known in the Japanese as Eria the Water Spirit Charmer. Her effect is Flip Effect. Target one water monster your opponent controls. Take control of that target while this card is face upon the field. For brevity, all of the charmers have the exact same effects, albeit they correspond to their element. So, to save time, I'll only mention something that is unique to them if it pops up. This also applies to the upgraded forms, of course, and their familiars. After Eria mastered the possession technique, she would become Familiar Possessed Eria. You can send one Eria the Water Charmer and one water monster you control to the graveyard to special summon this card from your hand or deck. If you do, this card gets the following effect. During battle between this attacking card and a defense position monster whose defense is lower than the attack of this card, inflict the difference as battle damage to your opponent. Familiar Possessed Eria also has an alternate artwork. After Eria had enhanced her powers further, she would adopt a second spirit and become Eria the Water Charmer Gentle, known in the Japanese as Eria the Clear Water Spirit Charmer. Requiring two monsters, including a water monster, this card is always treated as a Familiar Possess card. You can target one water monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon it to your zone this card points to. If this link summoned card is destroyed by battle, or is destroyed by an opponent's card effect while it's in the monster zone, you can add one water monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Eria the Water Charmer Gentle once per turn. Finally, as Eria reached the peak of her power in her adulthood, she would become Raging Eria, known in the Japanese as Surging Eria. Once per turn, you contribute one water monster you control, except this card, to special summon one water monster from your hand. The monster special summoned by this effect is destroyed if Raging Eria is removed from your side of the field. Her unique spirit art is Spiritual Water Art Aoi, known in the Japanese as Water Spirit Art Mallow. Tribute one water monster, look at your opponent's hand, then send one card from their hand to the graveyard. Her familiar and its upgraded forms are Gigabyte. Its flavor text reads, he has a tranquil soul, but carries a destiny that one day his heart shall be tainted by evil. Gigabyte. You can only control 1 Gigabyte. If you control a spellcaster monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. When this card is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 monster with 1500 attack and 200 defense from your deck, except Gigabyte. Awakening of the Possessed Gigabyte. You can special summon this card from your hand or deck by sending 1 face-up spellcaster monster and 1 face-up level 4 or lower water monster you control to the graveyard. You can only use each of the following effects of Awakening of the Possessed Gigabyte once per turn. When this card is special summoned by its effect, you can send 1 random card from your opponent's hand to the graveyard, then each player draws 1 card. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add 1 Spiritual Water Art card or 1 Possessed Spell or Trap from your deck to your hand. Aussa the Earth Charmer, known in the Japanese as Off the Earth Spirit Charmer. After mastering the possession technique, she would become Familiar Possessed Aussa. She also has an alternative artwork. After growing in power, she would adopt a second spirit and become Aussa the Earth Charmer Immovable, known in the Japanese as Off the Aloft Earth Spirit Charmer. Finally, at the peak of her power and adulthood, she would become Avalanching Aussa, known as Raging Off in the Japanese. Her unique spirit art is Spiritual Earth Art Kurogane, known in the Japanese as Earth Spirit Art Iron. Its effect is to tribute 1 Earth monster, special summon 1 level 4 or lower Earth monster from your graveyard, except the tributed monster. Her familiar and its upgraded forms are Archfiend Marmot of Nefariousness. Its flavor text reads, an air marmot that has a nefarious horn and wings. It attacks by throwing acorns. Nefarious Archfiend Eater of Nefariousness, known more simply in the Japanese as Daemon Eater. Its unique ability is, once per turn during your opponent's end phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can target 1 face-up monster you control, destroy it, and if you do, special summon this card. FYI, if you're curious about why it's named Archfiend Eater, well, that's because in its artwork, it's literally eating the head of an Archfiend. Awakening of the Possessed Nefarious Archfiend, known in the Japanese as Awakening of the Possessed Daemon Reaper. Its unique effects are, when this card is special summoned by its effect, you can special summon 1 level 4 or lower monster from your graveyard, but negate its effects. It also adds the Earth Art card instead. Hiita the Fire Charmer. After mastering the possession technique, she would become Familiar Possessed Hiita. She too has an alternative artwork. After enhancing her power, she would adopt a second spirit and become Hiita the Fire Charmer Ablaze, known in the Japanese as Hiita the Scorching Fire Spirit Charmer. Unfortunately, her artwork was censored for international release. At the peak of her power and adulthood, she would become Blazing Hiita. Her artwork was also censored for international release. Her unique spirit art is Spiritual Fire Art Kuranai, known in the Japanese as Fire Spirit Art Crimson. Its effect is to tribute 1 fire monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack. Her familiar and its upgraded forms are Foxfire, whose effect is, during the end phase, if this card was destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard this turn, and was face-up at the start of the damage step, special summon this card from the graveyard. This face-up card cannot be tributed for a tribute summon. Inari Fire. Once per turn during your next standby phase, after this face-up card on the field was destroyed by a card effect and sent to the graveyard, special summon it from your graveyard. Awakening of the Possessed, Greater Inari Fire. Its unique effects are, when this card is special summoned by its effect, you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to the original attack of 1 monster they control, your choice. You can also add the Fire Spiritual Art. Wynn the Wind Charmer. After mastering the possession technique, she would become Familiar Possessed Wynn. Familiar Possessed Wynn also has an alternate artwork. After enhancing her power, she would adopt a second spirit and become Wynn the Wind Charmer Verdant, known in the Japanese as Wynn the Verdant Wind Spirit Charmer. Through her own pure willpower, she was able to master the art of the wind and become Wynn the Wind Channeler, known in the Japanese as Wind Medium Wynn. Her effect is this card is always treated as a Charmer card. You can discard this card and 1 other Wind monster, add 1 Wind monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand, except Wynn the Wind Channeler. Also, you cannot activate monster effects for the rest of this turn, except Wind monsters. When a Wind monster you control is destroyed by battle while this card is in your hand, you can special summon this card. You can only use each effect of Wynn the Wind Channeler once per turn. At the peak of her power, in adulthood, she would become Storming Wynn. Unfortunately, her artwork was also censored for international release. Her unique spirit art is Spiritual Wind Art Miyabi, known in the Japanese as Wind Spirit Art Elegance. Its effect is tribute 1 Wind monster, then target 1 card your opponent controls, place that card on the bottom of the deck. Her familiar and its upgraded forms are Petite Dragon, whose flavor text is a very small dragon known for its vicious attacks. Ranryu, known in the Japanese as Storm Dragon. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can target one monster with 1500 attack and 200 defense in your graveyard, except Ranryu, special summon it. Awakening of the Possessed Rasenryu, known in the Japanese as Awakening of the Possessed Spiral Dragon. Its unique effects are, when this card is special summoned by its effect, you can return one card your opponent controls to the hand, and it can also add the Wynn spiritual art instead. Dharc the Dark Charmer. After mastering the possession technique, he would become Familiar Possessed Dharc. Unlike the original 4 Charmers, he has an additional effect. When he is summoned through his effect, you can add one level 3 or 4 light spellcaster type monster from your deck to your hand. His unique spirit art is Dark Spirit Art Greed. Tribute one dark monster, draw 2 cards. Your opponent can negate this effect by revealing one spell card in their hand. His familiar was Medabat, known in the Japanese as Dark Napoleon. Its flavor text reads, an eyeball fiend created by a servant of the wicked. It uses dark blasts to blow away its enemies. An upgraded form of this monster can be seen in his artwork, however, this has not yet been released. It's worth throwing out there as well that Dharc might actually only have one arm, as his right arm is never shown in any artwork apart from an anime card called Panic Shuffle. He could also be tied to another card whose appearance and staff look very similar to his. Lyna the Light Charmer. After mastering the possession technique, she would become Familiar Possessed Lyna. She too has a unique ability that sets her apart from the original 4. When summoned through her effect, you can add one spellcaster type monster with 1500 defense from your deck to your hand, except Familiar Possessed Lyna. Her unique spirit art is Spiritual Light Art Hijiri, known in the Japanese as Light Spirit Art Holy. Its effect is tribute one light monster to target one banished monster. Your opponent can reveal one trap card from their hand to negate this effect, otherwise you special summon that monster. A familiar is Happy Lover, whose flavor text is, enemies become overjoyed when struck by the heart rate emitted from the forehead of this tiny cherub. Its upgraded form too can be seen in the artwork, however, like Dharc, this has not yet been released. One final thing to mention about this monster is the fact that she looks very similar to another card, Temporal Magician. Despite the similarities, this is only a coincidence, as both artworks were created by the same person, and although this could change in the future, there's no relation. Both Lyna and Dharc have a lot more forms that they could achieve, and if they do, honestly, they could be a truly powerful force to be reckoned with, as the vast majority of duel monsters are comprised of light and dark monsters. But only time will reveal the heights that they can climb to, and hopefully also it will reveal why these two have shackles bonding them both. Grand Spiritual Art Ichirin, known in the Japanese as Great Spiritual Art One Ring. Negate your opponent's first monster effect that resolves each turn while you control a spellcaster monster with 1500 defense. During your main phase, you can reveal one spellcaster monster from your hand, and if you do, add one monster with the same attribute, but with 1500 attack, 200 defense, from your deck to your hand. And if you do that, shuffle the revealed card into the deck. Awakening of the Possessed. Monsters you control gain 300 attack for each different attribute you control. Charmer and Familiar Possessed monsters you control cannot be destroyed by card effects. If a spellcaster monster with 1850 original attack is normal or special summoned to your field, draw one card. Spirit Charmers. Discard one card, take 2 cards from your deck with different names from each other that are Charmer monsters, Familiar Possessed monsters, and or Possessed spell or traps. Add one of them to your hand and set the other. You can only activate one Spirit Charmers per turn. Unpossessed. Charmer monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle. If a Familiar Possessed monster you control attacks an opponent's monster, it gains 800 attack during damage calculation. If a monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect while this card is already face up in your spell and trap zone, you can special summon one spellcaster monster with 1500 defense from your deck, whose attribute is different from at least one of those destroyed monsters' original attributes on the field, in a tap position or face down defense position. You can use this effect of Unpossessed once per turn. And with that, guys, that is the Charmer archetype done. Honestly, I wanted to hold off making this video because one day we'll get all of the Charmers, but I don't know how far away that day is, so today's the day in my books. Before we go, I want to give a massive shout out to the people that help support me and make these videos possible. Firstly, massive shout out to my platinum backers that give that little bit extra a month. It's really appreciated. NemoChan77, Daniel Toms, thank you very much. As well to my YouTube and gold backers, ZachZach30, Michael Waclawski, Stefan Poles, Silver Defender, Danny Bound, Ignis Tracile, Yugioh Everything, Goosey Q, Yokaido Kenya, Riaz Gremory, Queen, Elizabeth Denise Leggin, Jolly Kyle, and Jeremy Pontier, as well to my silver backers as well. Guys and girls, Thank you very much. See you next time.